And we are back. I am Christopher Lamy. I am here with Evan Stewart, the master trainer of K-Pro K9. I, again, am Christopher Lamy, the owner of K9 Coaching with Chris, and we together are Whiskey and Wolves.
Yeah, dude.
We are here to talk about some whiskey and talk about some cool dog stuff. We are here to debunk the bunk in professional dog training, and we do a damn good job of both.
I think we do, yeah.
So today we've got a very cool topic, right? We're talking about the 3 predominant styles of professional dog training.
That's right, yeah.
Being force-free, compulsory, and balanced training, right? Very important and very cool topic. But before that, the whiskey.
Yeah, man.
This is a cool whiskey.
What do we got going on today?
This is one of my favorites that we've done thus far. For the simple reason that it's local. This is 7-3 Distillery. They're out of New Orleans. The reason it is named 7-3 Distillery is actually because there are 73 neighborhoods in New Orleans, right? And so each one of their whiskeys or vodkas or each one of their spirits are named after a different neighborhood in New Orleans. The one we have today is the Irish Channel. It's an Irish Channel whiskey. It's really light. It's really smooth. It's delicious.
Listen, Irish Channel, if I'm not mistaken, Irish Channel is part of the Bayou Sauvage, like national refuge, right? Like that's
no idea. I just like the whiskey.
Yeah. They got like a castle there and stuff. Just like as you're going in.
Wait, is that the castle on the water? Yeah, that thing's cool. So that came up for sale not long ago.
Yeah.
Actually.
So that's Irish Channel out there. So like if you've ever been to New Orleans and you're like, hey man, on the way in on 10, I passed this funky house that's kind of built like a castle.
Looks exactly like a castle.
Yeah. That's where you're talking about, man. That's where this thing's named after, huh?
It is. Yeah. Apparently, I don't know New Orleans. I just like their whiskey. But what I'll say is we went to Elizabeth and I went to a whiskey tasting, the one before you and I went, and the 7-3 Distillery was there. The distiller, his name is Luca. Yeah. Really intelligent, really informational, really knows his whiskey.
Don't worry about me. I'm just gonna sneak in here while you finish this up.
But out of all the whiskeys that they had, and all the they have other, they have vodka and they have these other spirits. This is one of the more smooth ones. And a really, really big fan. I told you about it after that night, and we both have this in our counters.
This is
so really pumped about this. Especially if y'all are in the New Orleans area, Louisiana area, you got to check out 7-3 Distillery. Even if you're not, they're nationwide. You got to check them out.
Yeah, look, guys, don't judge my pours. All right, we only do big boy pours here on Whiskey and Wolves. Yeah. Oh no, not this time. Not this time. That's 2 from now, right? Like I start spilling whiskey 2 from now.
That's why you pour and I don't, because I would have spilled that immediately.
Hey man, cheers today. My man. All right. Thanks for the lead in on this. Let's see where we are.
Warm and delicious.
Dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. That is so it's not as heavy in this. This is going to sound crazy to Jameson drinkers, but to me, that's not as heavy as Jameson. It's a little lighter, less oily. Like that's like a really, really, really good,
very yummy.
Yeah, that's a really good whiskey. That, again, guys, Irish Channel whiskey, 7-3 Distilling, right here. We're just outside New Orleans filming today, so like right here in New Orleans, like check these guys out. And if you're by the distillery, apparently say hi to Luca.
Luca's cool. Yeah. Luca's a cool dude.
So absolutely. Say hi to that guy whenever you're there, man.
All right, let's shift to dog training, guys.
Yeah, man, let's jump in.
We are here to talk about the 3 predominant styles of dog training, again, which are force-free, right? Yep. Also known as what else do they call it?
Right?
Positive only.
Positive only. Yep. You got a lot of trainers out there trafficking on a bunch of ideas for this, but like, we'll talk about it a little bit. Yep.
There's also on the opposite end of that is compulsory training, right? Some really aversive, harsh training.
That's some old school stuff right there.
Very old school. And then the method that we both subscribe to on different levels is the balanced training method.
Yeah, we're a little different, have some different methodologies between us, right? But yeah, balanced training, I think it's a larger tent in some ways, but like let's get in here and kind of like parse that out a little bit.
And the reason, and we'll kind of talk about this, but one of the things that's so important about these different training methods are the different conditioning types, right? The more known one, I guess, almost more commonly known as classical condition. Ivan
Pavlov, right? Pavlovian conditioning, sometimes called.
Pavlovian psychology or classical conditioning, whatever you want to call it. And really generally, guys, what classical conditioning is it's reacting to a stimuli, right? It's training a desired response to a stimuli. What I mean by that is Ivan Pavlov did this complete study, which we should be very clear on. This is not complete full science. Part of this has been debunked and added on to.
It's been nuanced over time.
Nuanced is a better word, correct. But the basis of it is you ring a bell every time you feed a dog.
Yep.
Right. And so if you do this 30 times in a row, that dog's going to understand, oh, the bell rang. That means food is coming.
Right.
And so their response was to salivate because they knew food was coming.
Yep.
And so you're training that response, because even if the food's not there and they hear the bell, that response is still there.
Right.
Right. And that's
this is one of the first places where we were really able to witness a mind being conditioned stimulus and response. Right.
Exactly.
And what was really interesting, if I remember the study correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But like one of the most interesting things about this is that a salivary response became more and more anticipatory to earlier and earlier portions of stimuli that they were able to connect together. And so, like for instance, at some point we didn't need the bell anymore. Just the turning of the doorknob created the salivation in the dogs. And then we even went back further, that the sound of the footsteps of the facilitator coming down the hall, the researcher coming down the hall, created the salivatory response. So one of the things that I tell people, I don't know about you, man, but like whenever we're really trying to parse this out, one of the things that I say often is when we think about classical conditioning, think about the way that a dog learns in context from the environment, right? These are environmentally produced behaviors, right? So like, another great place that classical conditioning happens is when the mailman shows up.
Yes.
Right. When the mailman shows up,
that is a stimuli. That mailman becomes a stimuli, and there's a response associated with it.
And so like when the mailman shows up, like, we have stimulus and then response. What's stimulus? Well, the mail truck pulls into the driveway or pulls up in front of your house. The mailman walks up to your door. The dogs lose their mind. Like we've all seen that. It's
and this is a very instinctive way for dogs to learn, right?
Absolutely.
This isn't something that you need to teach them to do. Hey, I'm going to ring this bell. No, it happens naturally. Dogs are always watching us, and it's a very natural way for them to learn.
Yeah.
And I think I think classical conditioning plays a part in all of the ways that we train, but more to the point, I guess, of what we're talking about today. Let's talk a little bit about operant conditioning, which came after classical, a little timeline wise, but is very important. Walk us through operant conditioning and what that means, and kind of break it down, the four quadrants, if you will.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So in operant conditioning, we actually have four quadrants of operant conditioning, right? And we talk about these all the time, really, really quickly and clearly, right? But
by conditioning, you mean getting a desired response.
Absolutely,
correct?
Right? Yeah. So like whenever we're talking about conditioning, we're talking about developing scenarios in which we can predict the outcome, right? So like for instance, when we condition our bodies for physical activity, we produce that physical activity over and over and over again. As we do it, the physical activity gets easier. That's one form of like physical conditioning. This is akin to that, where, through repetition, we build behavior sets and behavior chains. Right. And so when we're looking at operant conditioning, we start right down there at the bottom with the four quadrants of operant conditioning, right? So when we have four quadrants of operant conditioning, we have positive reinforcers, we have negative reinforcers, we have positive punishments and negative punishments. Now, this is a great place to pause and define some of that.
You said a lot of words, right? And this is science. So these are a lot of not complicated words, but not necessarily complicated, easy either.
Take this for what it is in the realm in which we work, right? Like this is actually pretty complex. Whenever somebody like comes to K-Pro Canine and they're like, hey dude, I want a job. My first question is name and define the four quadrants of operant conditioning. Because if you're in professional dog training and you can't name and define the four quadrants of operant conditioning, that's the door for me. Now that's an arbitrary criteria for me, but I'm going to be dead honest with you, man. I hold it, right? Because if you are charging, you should understand the science with which you're working.
You should understand what you're doing, because you're right. If you're training a dog, you are using these four quadrants.
This is
whether you understand it or not, and no matter what type of these three types of training you're using, you are using these four.
Right.
And if you don't understand it, you're manipulating and you're directing behavior.
Yep.
And that is psychology. That is a science.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand what you're doing, and you can't articulate it, there's something that you're missing as a professional.
Right. So for instance, like I did an interview with a trainer today. Where I was like, hey man, like show me how you're working with this dog. And this trainer's an amateur trainer. They're a good trainer, right? Good, right? And they're using, like positive leash pressure, like they're putting pressure on the dog in the opposite direction that they're trying to lure the dog. And I'm like, so you don't understand what we're doing here, right? Yeah, and because and there's a fundamental breakdown in the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. So let's get into this and define this for the folks that are listening and watching, right? So in reinforcers, a reinforcer is anything that we can add or subtract from the situation that increases the chances of a repeat performance. This is a really important concept, right? So reinforcement is about just exactly what it sounds like, right? It's about bolstering that behavior. It's about giving a fertile ground for that behavior in which to flourish, right? And really grab root.
It's a dog treat.
It's a dog treat. It's a dog tug, a toy. It's a ball.
It's a love. It's a smile.
It's a smile.
It's a happy face, happy voice.
No joke, right? Like, recent research would reveal that like your social reinforcement with your dog is actually like their highest value, right?
Which makes perfect sense, right? How do they communicate? Body language. Right. That's how they communicate. So our body, if we show them with our body, you made me happy. That's a great reward. Yeah. Right. You don't have to use a treat all the time. And that is a reinforcer.
Yeah, it is a reinforcer. So again, in positive reinforcement, and this is where we find this concept broken out most often in dog training and other places in our communities, right? Positive reinforcement is anything that we would add to the equation, right? That increases the chances of repeat performance, right? So for instance, I come home from work and I see that there are dishes in the sink, right? I do the dishes, put all the dishes away, everything's clean. When my wife gets home from work, she sees an empty sink and she's happy. Right. And because she's happy and she might want to reinforce that behavior, she might go to the pantry and get me a cookie. Right. Like this is kind of a silly
happy you went idea. That way instead of the way I was thinking.
Look, buddy, I'm here for you. It's a kid's show. Right. But those of you who are adults at home know, right? I know
why I do the dishes.
Right. I mean, somebody's got to do them. Right. But, like take it for what it is. When we look at this, right, like it's about adding something to the equation to to have an increase of the chances of the behavior happening again. Right. So, hey, I asked my dog to sit, my dog pops his butt on the ground. At that moment, I'm going to mark and reward. Right. So, I'm going to simply deliver that cookie within about a second time is important. Frame, you know what I mean?
And I think this is maybe, if not the most important part of the quadrant, it's by far the most known, right? Yeah. Everybody that brings a dog to either one of us, like, well, I taught him how to sit. Well,
I'll tell you, I think the most used is positive punishment.
I agree.
Right. Yeah, I agree. You know what I mean? So like people are, and we can talk about this and we will as we go on, right? That like, there's been a lot of misconception around some of these ideas over time. People didn't have the fluency they needed and they doled these words out in such a way that like, oftentimes we think of negative reinforcement, right, as actually a positive punishment. So punishment, right, to define the other side of the quadrants, right, is anything that we add or subtract from the equation that decreases the chances. So if we're reinforcing, we're adding something that increases the chances. If we're punishing, we're decreasing the chances of a repeat performance, right? So, my dog barks at me and I look at him and go, no, right? And typically that's going to be encountered as a positive punishment. Right. Right. A negative reinforcement, for instance, and we're going to talk about this when we get into compulsory, right? Is like pressure off, and we're going to talk about what that means in a little while. Right. And then with negative punishment, right? Negative punishment is, and this is my favorite in positive only training, right? They use a lot of negative punishment in positive only training, and then they still call it positive only. And I'm like, not exactly, but I understand where you're going, right? I understand that you're using the modern lexicon and colloquialism to understand, like from a societal perspective, what we're looking at. But when we look at negative punishment, the most commonly, at least in dog training, right? The most commonly recommended style of getting your dog to stop jumping on you is to ignore your dog. Well, technically you took your attention away from the dog to punish the dog for the behavior, right? So like that's negative punishment.
You're taking your attention away.
Right. So if you're using extinction theory and a positive only idea, you're not using positive only, right? And that's like a really important idea.
And that brings us directly to force free. And my personal biggest issue with force free training is the way that it's advertised. Right. It's advertised and it's marketed in a way that makes you feel really good. Oh, you're going to only use positive stuff for my dog. Of course I want to go this way. I don't want somebody that's going to beat my dog.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't want to sit here and say that force free doesn't work. I'm not saying that. I have had dogs that I have not had to use really any form of punishment or correction whatsoever, right? Sure. And you can call that force free if you'd like, but like you have said many times, as soon as you put a leash on that dog,
it's force.
That's force.
Yeah.
Right. So you're advertising something that you cannot deliver on.
One of the other big pushbacks here that we get in our community these days is like, well, if you can do it with a killer whale, this is my favorite, right? If you can do it with a killer whale, you should be able to do it with a dog, right? Listen, I hired a trainer that one of many, right? Like, but I've hired one of the young women that I hired, right? Like, came to me from marine mammal background. They take as many as 3 years to build a single full expression of behavior. Also, I don't have that time.
Also, that thing's not living with you 24 hours a day.
No, it's got its own
That thing's not swimming around your kitchen, right?
And
there's a whole lot more opportunities to do something bad.
But like, and on top of that, I kind of kick back with blackfish, right? So I'm like, and sometimes your animals drag you to the bottom of the pool and drown your sorry ass too. So, like, let's be very honest about what we're really looking at. Now, I don't make light of that situation. I say that like with all the gravitas and honest compassion. I'm really very sorry for those families and those people that have been injured by these large animals that, in my opinion, we shouldn't even be keeping. Right?
Whole nother topic.
Yeah,
but yes.
Whole nother topic. But when we get into force free stuff, like this is some of the argument around dog training that's really deleterious to the whole conversation. How do we create great relationship with a dog? Because it's not always all butterflies and rainbows, right? Well, and, I also see like a lot of, force-free trainers use things like gentle leaders. That's a massively aversive tool. I see them use things like easy walk harnesses. That's a massively aversive tool. It disjoints the scapula on the dog. It restricts their locomotion and normal movement, take it for what it is. This is a big conversation right now, and we're just kind of tiptoeing a little bit. There are some big names in our industry that are like absolutely like trying to cut each other over this topic right now. And like the guy who's on the force free side, and I won't mention his name here because like, I don't want to give that dude any more free press than he needs. But like, if you know what I'm talking about, right? And this dude was even caught like in a moment where his dog was about to break after a dude on a skateboard, given a leash pop. And I'm like, bro, there was like a great meme.
That sure looks like some positive punishment.
It's positive punishment.
Sure looks like punishment to me.
And here's what I'm going to say is, it was appropriately and expertly delivered.
Good
great
for him,
job,
then,
sir.
Because I think this is a really good point right now to discuss something. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, right? Yeah. But to you, what is a reward versus what is a punishment? I use the word correction; they're very synonymous. But what is the difference between what is a reward? So and what is a punishment or correction? Yeah.
So rewards are anything that I dig.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, anything that makes you smile.
That's the way that I think about it. Anything that I dig on, right? So like, believe it or not, my wife could reward me with extra dog sleeves. You know what I mean? Like for doing bite work and stuff, like dog gear. Like she could reward me with car parts because I'm also kind of a car guy, right? Like, she could reward me with car parts. It's literally, a great meal. My wife bakes homemade bread. That's a reward every time I get it. I always feel like a good boy whenever she makes bread. You know what I mean? Like seriously, I mean, it's kind of silly, but I mean, it's true that, literally anything that you can enjoy can be a reward. And conversely,
exactly right.
then,
and a
right?
correction or excuse me, a punishment.
Yeah. Conversely, then I would say that punishment is anything that we don't prefer, right? And being subjected to it in some way, right? So, like I will tell you that the entirety of the time that I was in school, every assignment was a punishment. I don't care. They could never make it fun. I was just not a big school guy. Don't get me wrong. Did I go to school? Absolutely. Did I enjoy all the things that I learned there? I really very much did. I could have stopped at lecturing. I could have stopped right there and never had to produce a paper or write you know what I mean? I never enjoyed the process of writing a paper.
And that's a shame, especially when bringing that idea back to like dog training.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to enjoy this? This is so much fun, right? And so to bring that back, the whole idea of force free is I'm going to get this dog to do what I want it to do. I'm going to get that desired result, right? By only offering him something positive. Isn't that amazing?
This is so good.
I love it. Oh, yeah, I love it.
Every time, man.
I enjoy it a whole lot.
But you're not wrong, right? So bringing him back to something he enjoys, right? Because the reality is that we want to talk about, my grandma used to say this thing that a lot of grandmas say, I'm sure, right? That you get more bees with what?
Honey.
Then don't say whiskey.
I was going to say whiskey.
You can't.
Is it shit?
No, it's definitely vinegar. But what I'll tell you is you get more bees with honey than you do vinegar, right? And when you look at this, right? Like
can I say the opposite of that one?
Yeah.
Bees don't try to explain to flies that honey tastes better than shit.
No, you're not wrong.
That's where I was thinking. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but that's a different connotation. That's a different idea, guys. Right? Like that's like peasant, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to explain that to you, right? But no joke, right? Like, when we look at this, we really start to understand, right, that we want dogs to want to work for us.
Absolutely.
We don't want to compel dogs into service, right? Like, there's lots and lots of history. Both of us being former military, right? There's lots of history of guys being compelled into service, right? Some reports right now say that, there are guys on the front lines in Ukraine on the Russia side that have handlers behind them with guns at their back, right? I'm like, man, I don't want to be compelled into service. I want to be like I was in an all volunteer service. Hey, man, I showed up for this, and the college for the record. But like when we look at force free stuff, we have this whole culture built around this. And, some of our big box stores were kind of complicit in this in like the early 2000s and in really demonizing any kind of punishment for dogs. And
it's a nice idea, right? Of course, you go and tell somebody like Elizabeth, like, hey, I can train your dog. And guess what? I'm not going to use any force at all. Well, of course I want that. Of course I want you to use that rather than somebody that's gonna. So you're telling me that you're going to use no force, then that means that this person is going to use force. I don't want that. But the problem is,
it's a pie in the sky idea. Let's not bullshit.
I don't want to say that it doesn't work again because it can. But what happens? On the time frame, what happens when that dog chooses that stimuli, that thing that they want over your reward? What happens?
Even past that, right? Like for me, it's like, that can happen, but not on your time frame. So here's one of the things that for me is like really important concept in modern dog training today, right? Is that all of us are hired to provide a product in a time frame for the client. Now, if the client looked at me and said, hey, I want to share something with you. And I'd go, okay, hit me. Right. And they go, all right, here's what I want is I want my dog trained completely through free shaping, completely force free.
I would dig that.
Right. Man, I would go to work. Right.
Mm-hmm. Not going to be in 2 weeks.
However, right. It would probably take me a couple of years and they would probably have to move me in. And I would probably be in the realm of $150K a year for that job. But man, would I show up for it with bells on? You know what I mean? Because the reality is that free shaping and completely force-free technique takes a long time for most people to build, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think it would really take me a couple of years? Probably not a couple of years, but far more than what most people's pocketbook could stand up to.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, like, take it for what it is. I mean, like, you know, if Warren Buffett called me, man, I'd be like, yeah, you got the purse for me, man. You know what I mean? If Elon called me, man, I'd be like, Elon, call me, by the way. It's just,
I love the idea of free shaping if it's realistic.
Yeah. But like, take it for what it is, man. Whenever you want a dog that has 9 behaviors installed in it in 2 weeks, free shaping is not going to get us there. You know, we've got to have both sides of the equation. But on the other side, man, like there's a deeper, seedier side to this for me. And that's where that gets into compulsory techniques, right? So there are some people that are out there trafficking compulsory training, you know, as balanced training. Did you know that?
Yes. Yeah. And I said this, I think once before already today, and I'll say it again. A dog needs to understand their boundaries. A dog's brain does not work the same way a human's brain works. It just doesn't, right?
It doesn't.
They are naturally going to test your boundaries. Sure. It's what they do.
I say it
so
like
they
this.
need to know what those boundaries are, and whether you use a physical correction or some sort of punishment,
sure,
they need to understand that, hey, this behavior is not acceptable and there's a consequence. Now, what that consequence is a matter of discussion, right?
Yeah.
And that brings us to compulsory training.
Yeah.
Compulsory training is you're going to do what I want or else.
Yeah. So like, you know me, man, like I talk about this in terms of it being the oxygen economy. As long as you do what I like you to do, you're allowed to breathe.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Wouldn't you like to breathe today? I would like to breathe today. So I better fall in line.
Listen, I spent 10 years in the Air Force training dogs, and this was our method of training. This was the method that we used. Predominantly, yes. Yeah. We weren't out there just beating the crap out of dogs.
I don't think you were, yeah.
But at the same time, these dogs were doing something way different, right? If this dog, if Kitty or Copy or DY or any of my other dogs didn't listen to me, someone died.
Right. And so we're talking about a margin of error.
Our pets are not doing that.
No, we're talking about a margin of error issue, right? And so like whenever I want to create and you know, I've done it, right? So like, you know about me that, you know, like I started training dogs in like all the way back in the late 90s, right? And back then it was all compulsory training by and large. The force-free movement didn't really grab anyone's real attention until like the 2000s, right? But prior to that, I mean, like, you know, we had guys out there selling you know, and I won't give them too much air, but like there was this guy out there selling this thing called Command Performance, right? Which was all Keeler method training. Bill Keeler was like, you know, Rin Tin Tin, Lassie's trainer back in the day, like, oh my gosh, big guy in Hollywood, and, you know, wrote dog training books starting as early as the 50s.
Did you know my first dog I ever remember owning, or not owning, excuse me, I was like 9. I didn't own it. First dog I ever trained, 9 or 10. It was a Rottweiler. Guess what his name was?
What?
Rin Tin Tin.
No way.
Love that dog.
No way.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries.
Love
right?
that dog.
But like, take it for what it is. When we look at these compulsory techniques, we've just kind of evolved past this idea, right? And so like, if you have somebody that comes out and just kind of like throws a choke chain on your dog and starts cranking them around, that's like big red flags to me at this point. Yeah. If they come out and they put a prong collar on your dog, it's the first thing they do. Hey, listen, we're going to put this piece of gear on your dog. It's going to change your dog's life. You know, it may.
It might, and there is a time and a place for a meaningful physical correction, and a correction to me is a communication tool.
Let's talk about that, right? Correction.
A correction is a means to communicate. Hey, I don't like that, right? But you can communicate with your child by spanking them, or you can communicate with your child by sitting down in the room and saying, "Hey, bud, I didn't like that very much." Right. There are different means of communication. Yeah. Yep. And you and I have a little bit of a difference here in the verbiage of correction versus punishment.
Yeah.
Right?
I got rid of correction a long time ago.
See, I like the word correction. I am a verbal guy. The law degree taught me that words matter. Words have intent, right? To me, punishment connotes you did something wrong.
That's right.
So you need a punishment.
I agree with that.
But dogs don't do stuff wrong.
That's right.
Right? They are following their instincts. They're doing what their instincts tell them. They're not doing bad behavior. They're not being bad.
They can't.
They're following their instincts.
Right.
They're having fun, right? So when I use the word correction versus the word punishment, I'm correcting that behavior, saying, hey, redirection, right?
Yeah.
I'm redirecting you to a behavior that's more appropriate rather than punishing you for what you actually did.
I usually talk about punishment in the idea of interrupting behavior.
Yep.
Right.
Interruption.
So
Redirection.
So more interruption than anything else, right? Like if a dog's producing behavior that I want to have an end to, I want that dog to cease the behavior that they're producing. I want to interrupt the behavior. That gives me the opportunity to replace the behavior if I can interrupt the behavior. Now, and don't get me wrong, like this is massively semantic, right? And like, let's cop to the idea that
we're two dog trainers.
We're gonna nerd out. Yeah, we're gonna nerd out
just
here
sit
a little
with
bit,
us
right?
for a little bit.
But hear me out, right? Like whenever I think about correction, right? Because it does connote that the dog did something wrong. I don't want to give that to my clients because the clients already think that their dog can do wrong. I disagree with that. Right?
I agree.
And so do you, right? Yep. So like whenever I say, hey man, go ahead and correct that behavior, I look back at, I think it was the Milgram experiment, right? Where it's like, we have this acquiescence to authority idea, right? Where like, in the Milgram experiment, right? Like people would have murdered people on the other side of the one-way glass.
Yes. Because they were told to by someone in a white coat.
Right.
Not even a scientist, someone wearing a white coat.
Right.
Yep.
And so if you guys are listening and you don't know what I'm talking about in the Milgram experiment, please go look that up and just read it. Massively fascinating idea in psychology. And I don't want to ever play into that. So for me, I look at folks and I go, hey, listen, your dog doesn't have a moral compass, doesn't have the cognition for a moral compass, will never know right from wrong. I would rather interrupt behaviors than correct behaviors, because we interrupt behaviors. It's kind of like the interrupting cow, right? You know, the interrupting cow, don't you?
Interrupting cow.
Anyway, so like, everybody knows the interrupting cow since we were in third grade, but like the reality of the situation is, right, is, when we look at this, right, like I would rather interrupt a behavior and teach people to interrupt behaviors than correct behaviors. And that's why, like, I've changed that point of communication. Now, are the things we're doing different?
Not really. It's verbiage.
So, no,
not really. No, we are not force free. We're not strictly compulsory.
But to your earlier point, words have meanings. And whenever I tell somebody to correct something, they're going to assume that it means that what was happening was wrong. And what I will tell you is that dogs produce behavior. It is not right. It is not wrong. It could be more or less preferred. But
appropriate or inappropriate. Yep.
Well, from your perspective, but what's appropriate to a dog, right? So like, I want to give them a little bit of grace, maybe, right? Where I go, hey, listen, what I'm really looking for here is this instead. So I want to interrupt the behavior that I prefer less, and then I want to insert behavior that I prefer more. Does that make good sense?
Redirection.
Right. And so like, that's what I do. So we were talking about compulsory training. It's kind of a do it or else kind of an idea, right?
A very antiquated idea. It really is. It just, did it work? Sure. And honestly, like looking back on this, this is how I trained dogs when I was a kid, right? We waited for them to do something wrong. No, you don't do that. But you weren't actually teaching them anything.
No.
You were just saying, I don't like that, and then punishing them.
Right. And so like that is, in my mind, that's the other side of classical conditioning, right? Is like catching that behavior in the moment and letting in being part of the environment that the dog learns the yeses and nos from, right? So like in that aspect, even though like you might put positive punishment in the equation there, right? I would make the argument that,
which I would hope that everyone that is using compulsory training is using some sort of positive training. Like I imagine you have to.
Bro, the answer is no.
That's kind of disgusting.
I run into it all. Look at me in our communities, because we're obviously here close to each other. I run into this.
That's not good.
And there is one individual on the Mississippi Gulf Coast that if I catch him on the street, catches these hands.
Is that the one I'm thinking of?
It is.
The one close to me?
Yep.
Gross.
And so like that dude can catch these hands, bro. But like the reality, and I did not make a threat, by the way, but like, but the reality, it's a joke.
Only
guys.
if you want them.
It's a joke. It's a joke. But he can catch these hands. It's a joke.
But I'll sell tickets to watch.
But yes, but the reality is it's such an old school idea, right? Like we have so much better research, especially over the last 20 years. There was a thing that happened in dog training that I was aware of whenever it was happening. And I don't know if you were or not. We can talk about this briefly, but like there was a thing that happened in dog training in the early 2000s where we had this big force-free push, right? And like PetSmart open programs and Petco open programs. And
it's such a great idea.
I love it.
It looks so great. Yes.
And out of it, right? Like, you know, we really held in stark light for like the first time in modern recollection. Don't get me wrong. You know, there are going to be people that come into these comments and they're like, dude, we were doing this in the 70s. And I'm like, yes, you were.
Sure,
and
you were.
Did not tell me about it. But like, you know, take it for what it is, right? Like it held in stark light, in stark contrast for the first time, this idea that, hey, you know, like I can literally reward a dog into a lot of behaviors that I want. You know, I can teach what I call tricks, right? Like there's a lot of tricks in dog training, right? That make us look awesome, right? Things like sit down, stay, loose leash, walk and come on call. These are all kind of like tricks that we teach the dog.
My favorite trick I teach my dogs?
Hit me.
To stay still.
Oh man, do nothing.
To just be.
So I draw a line there and I go, that's a skill.
That's a skill.
Right. So like man, we'll do a thing, the difference between tricks and skills one day. But like for all intents and purposes, my point is this, right? Is when we look at this right there in the early 2000s, we really started to see this huge push where even compulsory trainers started to go, I need to change. I need to soften my image because like the old language of anybody who does, this is William Keeler's language. So I'm going to put this in quotes, right? Like anybody who doesn't just ascribe to this method of training is a wincer, right? Literally in his book, he writes about people who wince whenever you train a dog. I don't want anybody in my programs wincing.
Or my dogs.
Right. You know what I mean? And so like, but like, you know, again, this is an antiquated style of training. This is the same guy and the same style of training who says, hey, when your dog's digging holes in the backyard, fill that hole full of water and then dunk your dog in it first, like head first. Right. Like,
don't do that.
This is the same style of training. Don't do that. Another really, really misleading idea in compulsory training is that a lot of compulsory trainers call this, you ready for it? Bond training.
Really?
I use my
like
bond with
you talking
the
about
dog.
James Bond?
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about 007.
Because you're certainly not building a bond if you're beating your dog.
Right. But
beating is a hard word. I'm sorry. Compulsory training is not beating.
Well, let me push back on that. Let me push back on that and say maybe you're trauma bonding.
Yeah. But I don't, and I love this conversation. I want to table it though, because we still got to get to balance training. Can I get one of those?
Yeah,
please?
Of course, man. Like, hey, look, we keep this little tumbler in here. Don't worry about it. But like, you know, it's got more ice balls in it. So like, that's important for whiskey.
And if you're going to drink a whiskey, whether it's an old fashioned or just straight whiskey, you got to have an ice ball or cube.
Yeah, I think so.
You pour a bunch of ice in here, I'm going to look at you like you're an idiot.
Yeah, probably.
Tell me about balance training.
All right, let's talk about balance training. Pour your whiskey while you do. Oh, I love that. So for me, and like I've been a balance trainer now for, this is creepy, but like 18 years.
Okay, so 18 years. So does that mean you were something before you were a balance trainer?
Yeah, sure was. Yeah, sure was. I sure was.
Sucker.
Look, man, you opened it up and I'll walk through it and I'll tell you that my initial, and this is, you know, like I wanted to be a professional dog trainer one day, right? Like my initial engagement into dog training.
How much of this we've finished already?
Man, we do okay.
We do good work.
Yeah, we do good work, man. But like my initial engagement into dog training was really through compulsory primary methods, right?
Same.
Like I didn't get taught how to lure and shape a dog's behavior deliver a reward.
Well, and
on
20
time.
years ago, that wasn't a thing, right? So what made you change?
Well, 20 plus, right? So like in March of 25, I'll be looking at like 27 years that I've been.
So what made you
teaching
change
dog
from a
training.
compulsory mindset to a balanced
Man, I'm
mindset?
so glad you asked, right? So my conscience.
Thank you. Same.
Yeah. So like, whenever I looked at the idea,
Just something that was like, there's got to be a better way than this.
Yeah. Whenever I looked at the idea of, like I used to create some dogs that colloquially now, like with some of my newer trainers, I'll be like, look, we don't make robots. Like I used to make dogs that moved from fear. Right. So like compulsory training. So here's the basic breakdown, right? In force free training, we're using a myriad of drives and excitement to create behavior. Right.
I want to talk about drives.
And
not
yeah,
today.
we will, but like we create this thing in force free training through manipulating drives with reward. Right. And compulsory training, we kind of tamp down or pack down a lot of intrinsic drives to create behavior, right? And then we use the limbic system, the sympathetic nervous system that governs fight and flight to really solidify behaviors, right? So whenever you're on the oxygen economy and it's like, hey man, I said sit, so you sit or you stop breathing.
So it's called pain avoidance is what you're talking about. Pain avoidance.
Escape and avoidance.
Pain avoidance. Yeah, same thing.
Is technically the whole idea, right? Escape and avoidance is technically the whole idea. But so I started out as kind of like one of those trainers because like that was,
it worked and that's what
not
you were
only
taught.
That, but like that was the trainer who taught me. And I started in a shelter environment, like following around a guy who had some really high performance dogs and high level dogs who was teaching some group classes and doing some things. I won't name him because like, that dude wasn't a villain. He was actually a hero in my story because he got me to where I am today in a lot of ways. And I don't ever want anybody to look at him and be like, oh, he was a bad guy.
Sure.
He was actually a great dude who was working with the information that he also had. You know what I mean? And that's an important idea as we look back across the scope. But one of the things that I tell people all the time before we get into what balance training is that like whenever you look at these older ideas of compulsory training, think about it like this, and I'll round this out this way. I often ask people the question, would you want a doctor who was trained in the 50s to treat you today? And oftentimes the answer is no, right?
Really?
I want the latest, greatest, best ideas. Oh my gosh, I just want all the good things, right? And it's like, that's right. You know what I mean? So like, let's not lean back on some of those previous ideas of training. Right. So whether it's force-free ideas only, right, which happened, like we said, like kind of in the early 2000s was this blossoming of force-free training, right? And then compulsory training like happened long before that. And for a long time, right? It was, hey man, that dog didn't do what I wanted it to do, so I punished it. Right. But balance training really gives us access to all four quadrants, right? So where force free sits in positive reinforcement, negative punishment primarily, right? I would make the case that compulsory training ends in, like negative reinforcement and positive punishment, like primarily, right?
Sure.
So opposite
and all
ends.
of them.
In balance training, we have access to all four quadrants, right? So we have positive reinforcers, negative reinforcers, positive punishments, negative punishments, and we look at all those things in equal stead. We don't look at one of them and prejudice them.
Yes.
Right.
And
that's
what
really
we're doing is
idea
we're
to me.
relying on and using the science that's there.
Sure.
Right. The classical condition, the operant conditioning, and all the other ones that are there that we haven't really brought up because they're not relevant today. Doesn't mean they're there or not there. Excuse me. Doesn't mean that we don't use them. But this is a science, and balance training, when you get down to it, is science. When you get down to it, right?
It should be. Like in balance training, right? Like we're looking at the most scientific, the most modern ideas, right? Where we take all four quadrants of operant conditioning and we kind of give ourselves access to all tools and all techniques, right? And I stopped thinking in terms of absolutes. And so I say at this point in history, right? At this point in history, I think balance training is the most scientific and the most modern way to engage because it gives us access and this is really important to me, it gives us access to all tools, all techniques to train the dog in hand. What does that mean? It means meet your dog where they are, find out who they are, find out what that personality is, find out what they're into, find out what's important to them, and then work with the tools that gives you, right, to really manipulate that a little bit and give it some kind of structure.
So
right?
let's build on that idea, right? As we close this out, we've been talking for a while now. Let's close this out and let's kind of build on that idea, because I think you're right. I think please do. Let's finish this. Anyway, let's build on that idea, because I think you're absolutely correct. Yeah. What is the goal of dog training, right? This is a dog training podcast. We are here talking about dog training. What is the goal of dog training?
Are you asking me?
It's to build. It's to build
wait. Are you asking me?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Hit me, dude.
What is the goal of dog training?
Oh, man. I love that question. Oh, my gosh. I love that question. All right. What's the goal of dog training? Let's walk it out, right? You ready for this? The goal of dog training for me, right, is to open a line of communication in which I can cast an expectation and have that expectation fulfilled by my dog, right? And... right? That's the first part, right? I say sit, you sit, right? Perfect, right? And, right? How do I want to say this best? Hold on. All right, here we go. And I want to ensure that from my perspective, I'm doing everything that I can to ensure that my dog lives a happy, healthy
life
and fulfilled existence on this planet. That's my goal of dog training. I want to pour into my dog, and I want to ensure that I have some good steering and brakes on my dog, so that I'm like, hey man, I know that you wanted to eat that squirrel, this afternoon in the park. I massively appreciate the fact that you didn't pull my shoulder out of joint to go do it. You know what I mean?
And because of that, I'm going to give you something.
And because of that, right? Mm-hmm. You have a massively fulfilling life at home in which you understand the world that you're living in. You engage it stress-free. And we're in such deep relationship that you choose me and my family. This is important, in equal stead, right? Because some people have people who, some people have people in their families that have like resource guarding dogs around one individual, right? I don't want to be special to you. I want you to engage me and my family in a familial way where like we bring you into our circle. That's that's the goal of dog training to me. All right. You ready? Chris.
Yes, sir.
What is the purpose of dog training in your mind?
Thank you for asking.
I knew you would thank
question.
Me. Yeah.
Huh. I think that the object of dog training, the only reason you get a dog is because you want something, right? You want companionship, you want love, you want whatever it is. We are training these dogs to fit into our lives, right? We're not training ourselves to live in their lives. We're training them to live in ours, correct? So going back to what we've talked about today, we need that balance. We need that. That's because it's good. It means the conversation is going to get good.
Right? Yeah.
We need that balance of showing them that this is appropriate or good, and I put it in quotes, good behavior. Preferred. This is inappropriate or bad or unpreferred behavior. I was about to hit you, bro. I was going to be like non-preferred behavior. Non-preferred, unpreferred, right?
Yeah.
We need to teach these dogs what we expect out of them because we want something from them.
Yeah.
You only get a dog because you want a dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a want.
But why do you want it?
That dog is going to bring something to your life, right? And you are looking for what they're going to bring to your life.
Agreed.
But this is not a vehicle. This is an animal. This is an autonomous creature that has its own needs, that needs things from you.
Thoughts, feelings, desires.
This is a relationship
between
you and another creature that you have to build a communication style around to be able to say, hey, this is what I want. This is what you want. This is what I need. This is what you need. Right. There is so much that you can learn from a dog. There's so much you can get from a dog. Don't forget about what you have to give. Right.
Man,
don't forget about what you need to give to that dog.
Wait. Can we just hang out there for a second? I know, look, if we're in that place where like, hey man, there's like, and if, for those of you who can hear my dog barking in the background, we don't exist in a sound stage. Okay. But, take it for what it is. Tell me about that a little bit more. Give me more.
So, and this is why I like balanced training, right? Because I want to communicate with my dog. I don't want to train them. I don't want to train
Time out.
Who I'm living with.
Time out. What are you?
I'm a behavioralist.
Get the fuck.
You know what? I am.
What?
You know I am. I'm a fucking behavioralist. I'm not a dog trainer. I just don't call myself that because people don't know it.
Right.
It's easier to call myself a dog trainer.
I'll give you that. But what, okay, you know what? Like, here's my deal, right? Like, whenever we look at this, right? Like, I think you and I are very aligned here, right? And so, like, for me, right? Like, whenever people go, hey, man, what do you do for a living, right? Often now I say, I own a dog training business, but my real job, maybe I can give this to you, who knows, right? But like my real job is helping dogs and people live better together. Come on, dude, look at your face. Those of you who are watching, like that's the look of fuck yeah, that's what I do, right? Like,
you know what
the answer.
Can I tell you what I do for a living?
Hit me.
I help dogs live a better life. And as a result of that,
man, I like that almost as much as what I say.
As a result of my dogs living better lives,
it just cheers me. Hold on. Yeah.
Their humans are able and allowed to live better lives.
Man. You know,
I am in this for the dogs.
There's a piece of me, dude. There's a piece of me right now in this moment where I'm like, I don't know why we work apart from each other. It's fine, but it's like
I make too much money.
Yeah, it is because you make too. You know what, dude? Like I probably couldn't afford you. Anyway, listen.
I mean, you want to make an offer? I'm in.
Look, I mean, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. You know what, dude? I probably could afford you, but like, anyway, like, here's the deal, guys. Hey, listen. Today, and look, I'm going to round us out. Are you good with that?
Yes, we're getting off.
We're just goofy now.
Irish 7-3 Distillery, you did it.
Thank you. Good
Go
jobs.
find
Good
it,
jobs.
guys.
Hey, listen, no joke. Hey, listen. Thank you for joining us today on Whiskey and Wolves. Today's whiskey was Irish Channel Whiskey at 7-3 Distilling. Go see Luca down there and find out what he has to offer. I'm like here to tell you, it was fantastic. As it turns
Isn't this
out.
fun?
It was, dude. It's always fun, right? Like, hold on. It's better to pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today,
guys. To close out seriously, force-free, compulsory, balanced training.
Yep.
Right. If you find a force-free trainer for your dog that can handle force-free training.
On 0 time frame.
Good job.
That's a massive, amazing idea.
Congratulations.
Right? Yep.
But don't get your hopes up. Okay.
But
if you see a trainer that is working with choke chains or that is working with your dog needs to do this or your dog needs to obey.
Has to.
Ask some questions.
Ask some questions. Okay? Find out who that is.
There are different methods. People like myself, people like Evan are there. The balanced training method is here.
Yeah, we're not alone.
Find what is best for you.
Yeah, we're not alone.
If you have questions, reach out to us. We're here.
Absolutely.
And to close this thing out, I will say as usual, what do you want to hear?
Yeah, hey, listen.
What do you want to talk about? What do you want us to talk about?
Follow, subscribe, leave your comments, right? Like we're working on a system right now where like, hey, as soon as you leave those things, we're going to get like a real time indication that those things are happening. So like, you know, if you got questions, qualms, concerns, feel free to just like hit us up. And also feel free to look up caninecoachingwithchris.com, right? Like,
I'm very good looking. I've got a lot of cute pictures.
As it turns out, like
I'm pretty good at what I do.
Dude,
not great,
I'll
but
smush his
good.
cheeks and smoosh his, nose, right? Anyway, but like, hang out with that dude. Not
Is
right
that
now. That's weird.
Do,
no, I mean, maybe later. Anyway,
okay,
but like,
sorry,
and
guys.
also like, if you have questions, pop over to kprocanine.com. That's KPROK, the number 9.com. And we've got a full FAQ and everything that you need over there as well. Feel free to hang out with us. But again, hey, listen, if you liked what you saw here today, feel free to send that to a friend who's into dogs.
We're fucking nuts, but
we are
fun.
nuts, dude, but we're fun. And there's lots, listen, and there's lots of dog nerds out there, right? And if we got something wrong, go ahead and feel free to challenge us in the questions. If you're like, bro, that's not my understanding of what you just said, feel free to pop that up there. Let's get the opportunity to have some, like honest discourse. I'm not going to tell
honest discourse. Fuck you. You're wrong.
No, that's not true. All right. Anyway, but listen, no, it's not. Anyway, here's the deal, right? Is like, my God, Chris, this is a day, isn't it? Anyway, but listen, guys, I know like 7-3 Distillery did us right.
Don't drink. Don't put this much in my body and ask me to be politically correct.
It's unfortunate. Anyway.
Okay?
Listen, hey guys, at home, thanks for joining us for Whiskey and Wolves. Next time, we're going to deal with a lot of other topics, but in the meantime, feel free to engage us down in the comments, like, subscribe, comment.
Let us know what you want to hear.
Let us know what you want to hear. If you have topic suggestions, hey, listen, I've been enjoying you guys for a couple of sessions now. Like, hang out with us for this idea. Let us know. And until next time, hey, listen, guys, train happy. Oh man, that's good every time. I'm telling you. Irish Channel Whiskey, guys, 7-3 Distilling. Hit him up. Apparently Luca's the man. So
delicious.
Hang out with that guy.
This is not Luca. But
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, dude, maybe Luca's delicious. I don't know about that guy. Anyway,